friends, welcome back to the Craft Castle. My name is Ashley, and do you love this 7-foot tall fringe background that I made? And can you believe that a local party girl in town told me that she was gonna make this for $800? And I said, well, and I decided there's no way. I'm gonna make it for $25. And I did. For $25, I made this fringe background. Can you believe that? $800 fringe background that I did for $25. Amazing. I'm gonna show you how to make it today because it's truly not difficult. It's time consuming, yes, but not difficult. You're gonna be able to do this DIY project. You're gonna be able to save a whole bunch of money. And holy cow, when you have your parties, your people are gonna come to your party and go, how much did you spend on this? Because this right here is gorgeous. And you're gonna go, $25. $25. Now, I do have to tell you, I'm not the person that just randomly decides one day to make a fringe background. Right now, I am currently prepping for my daughter's graduation party because she is graduating high school and getting ready to go off to college. And this mom heart is currently spiraling. You know, your baby girl's grown up, so you're kind of getting a little bit sad. So to distract me from all of my feelings and emotions, which I'm sure my therapist is like, that's not healthy, but you know what? It's okay for me. I'm just distracting myself and I'm making all the decorations. And so I made one and I decided, you know what? This turned out A, so good. B, I saved so much money. And C, I know for a fact, my people here on YouTube want to know how to make this. So I'm going to show you how. And I'm going to show you how to make this for super cheap. And I'm going to show you how to create the biggest showstopper. And I'm also going to just distract my mom brain emotions. That's what we're going to do today. You're going to help me distract me from the real life problems of my daughter growing up. All right, now that you've heard me ramble on a little bit about why in the world am I doing this, let's get into the supplies that you're going to need. Now, the very first thing I want to say about the supplies, I did say that this cost me $25 to make. However, I did not include the metal frame that you need to purchase in order to make this fringe background. The reason why I did not include the cost of the metal frame into the backdrop, the entire price of the backdrop, is because the metal frames are reusable. Everything else is not reusable, and so I would consider that to be a cost. But the metal frames eventually will pay off if you keep using them over and over and over again. However, you will need the metal frames for this, and frankly, I don't think they're that expensive, especially because they are reusable. Now, all the supplies that I used today in today's project are linked in a full shopping list that I created on Amazon, so just be aware of that. So the next thing that you're going to need, you technically can get at the hardware store. However, I found it to be cheaper on Amazon. Now, the next thing that you're going to need is plastic tablecloths. I would strongly suggest avoiding the plastic tablecloths from the Dollar Tree. Yes, they're probably cheaper. However, the plastic sheeting for those Dollar Tree ones are so thin, they're almost see-through. And then the quality, your end results aren't gonna look the same. Trust me on this. Do not get and avoid at all costs the Dollar Tree tablecloths. The other thing that I like about the Amazon ones is these get sold in a 3-pack. And if you're gonna be doing 2 arches, you're gonna need 3 because this arch right here is 7 foot tall and I used 1.5 tablecloths of each color for this fringe backdrop. So in total, I used 9 tablecloths for this. Now, the amount of tablecloths that you will end up needing for your final thing all depends on how full you want to make your fringe backdrop. Now let me slide my table out just to show you. So when I first started this large fringe background, I did the orange first, and this right here, this orange color, is all 1 tablecloth. That's 1 full tablecloth. So for the rest of the colors, I went really thin. And so truly it depends on how full you want your fringe backdrop is how many plastic sheets you're going to need. But again, for me, I used 1.5 sheets of each color for this entire fringe background. The next thing that you're going to need is some zip ties. The ones that I have are 4-inch cable zip ties. These ones seem to be the easiest to work with because you don't have a lot of long ends. Now, the other things that you're going to need is a good pair of scissors, a ruler if you're going to use the scissors to cut your tablecloth, which I think is honestly the easiest. And then a guillotine cutter. I use it just for one cut and then I just switch over to the scissors. You don't necessarily need the guillotine cutter. I just use it because it's like a lot quicker. And then you're gonna need a hair tie because this craft is definitely a hair up craft. Outside of the supplies, the next thing you're going to need is a bit of patience because this right here is going to take you some time to make. I absolutely love the end result and I'm so glad I saw this through, but this right here took me 5 hours to make. It is definitely worth every single second that I spent on it, but just know that it's going to take you a bit of time to make this from start to finish. So you're gonna have a little bit of patience, which I can't link for you. You're gonna have to find that within. All right, y'all, are you ready to make an $800 arch for only $25? I'm so excited to teach you how to do this because this right here is such a showstopper. Okay, so the very first thing we want to do is assemble the metal arch that we are going to put the poultry fencing into. Now, the metal arch that I bought, I love it because it does come apart, so you don't have to have it fully assembled all the time, and they actually go together pretty easy. You just have to make sure and have it unscrewed, but they just have like little screws on the back. Now, I do suggest that when you are assembling this, that you are mindful about where these like nuts are. So like here is the T-brace, and the T-brace has this like nut. You want to make sure that the nut for this thing right here is facing the same way as this. So it just keeps everything like on the back, like the ugly on the back. You want to keep all of it on the back. You don't want having any of your nuts exposed. So we're going to keep the back with the back and the front with the front. Okay, then on here, on the ends of this thing right here, they have these like screws. You want to take the screws out on both ends. And the arches that I purchased did come with like extra bolts and stuff. You don't need them, but you are gonna need the little tool. You're just gonna put the tool in and tighten up the screws so it's not wobbly. Okay, you wanna make sure that all your nuts all facing you or facing one direction because you're gonna have a front and you're gonna have a back. So you wanna make sure that all the nuts are gonna be facing you. And then you're just going to assemble the arch portion. Okay, so now we have our assembled arch. You can see it's significantly smaller, which is great. The next thing that you're going to want to do is taking your fencing. I'm gonna start at the bottom, and all I'm gonna do is take my fencing and I'm just going to hold it on one end. I guess you could get a ruler or a measuring tape to like be more exact, but you know what? This honestly worked for me. I'm gonna go from the outside of the one pole to the outside of the next pole, holding it with my finger like that. Now all I'm gonna do is trim off out of the roll. Okay, now I'm gonna need 2 of these. So I'm just gonna take my end on one end, and I'm gonna make a second one the exact same length as the one that we cut. Close to it. It doesn't have to be exact. You definitely need it to be longer than the width of your frame. The reason why I'm not really being too exact on this is because once we start zip tying the netting to the actual frame, you're probably going to end up needing to trim the excess off because you don't want that to be shown on your backdrop. Okay, and then as far as that plastic sheeting, you're done because you only needed 2 of those. Now what you want to do is take your zip ties. You're going to take a bunch of zip ties, and we're going to start at the bottom. And all you want to do is taking your top, you want to loop this through just the very top. You don't need to make it tight. We just need to get it on there so we're not fumbling around. The other thing that I would like to note here is I had really cute painted fingernails before I started my first arch. By the time I got done, I broke 4 nails. So just know that you're about ready to break some fingernails with this project. Okay, then I'm gonna make it tight, going to the next side and doing the same thing. We're just gonna go on the corners first, and we're going to just essentially hook this onto our metal frame. It's okay if it's not level, because we're gonna fix that here in a second. Then what you want to do is taking 2 more zip ties. You want to go to the bottom corner, and we want to zip tie the bottom corner to the frame. Okay, now that we have the 4 corners, what you want to do is essentially the same process with the top, but what you want to do is start at the bottom corner. The first one we started at the top corner. This time we want to start at the bottom, and then you're going to go to the other side and do the other bottom corner. It's okay if it's not tight. Okay, now what I'm gonna do is I am just gonna take one zip tie. I'm gonna go to the very top and I am just gonna put a zip tie at the very top of the frame. Now we're gonna go to the middle where these two junctions are. And all you wanna do is clip these together. Okay, now what I'm gonna do is start at the bottom. Now that we pretty much have it all put onto the frame, what I'm gonna start doing now is pulling my netting tighter with the zip ties. What I found out is if you make this loose, your fringe backdrop will dance a little bit more. It just won't be as sturdy. So all you wanna do is taking your zip ties and you wanna pull tight on your netting. And this is why you'll probably end up having extra, which is why I didn't do a ruler, is because you are going to use scissors and trim off any extra netting if you have it. Okay, so now you can see that my screen is pretty tight. There is like a little bit of give here, but it's not loose. You are also gonna see that there is like a ton of extra on the top. This is why I just did the straight line, because once you pull it tight, what you wanna do is go around your entire frame and you want to cut off the extra. So like right here, there is this like little overhang. We want to trim it all off. So we want to make it nice and even to the edge of the frame. And you're gonna go all the way around the entire frame, getting rid of all the excess at the very top. You wanna be mindful that you don't cut your zip ties because that'll be a problem. But you just wanna go around the entire frame, making it nice and tight around the frame. This is gonna give you that finished and polished look that you're wanting for your finished product. So you can see with the frame, that meshing, it's nice and straight throughout the entire thing and there's no overhang on any of it. That's what you're wanting. That's just gonna be easier for you to hide the meshing when we put on the fringe, but you just want all of it to look nice and straight on the frame. Now you could, if you wanted to, trim off the excess of the zip ties. However, I didn't do that with my first one and it's perfectly fine. No one's gonna look at the back. But if you wanted to, you could trim off these ends. Now when it comes to cutting the fringe, what you want to do is take your plastic sheeting that you have. I'm just gonna open it right up. This is where I use my guillotine cutter. It's the only thing that I use. And on your plastic sheeting, one side has it all loose and then the other side has the folded part. What I do is I just take my guillotine cutter and I just cut off the very end of my plastic sheeting that has the fold lines in it. And I'm just gonna cut just a little bit. So all I'm gonna be left with, I mean, it looks like it's all stuck together, but now this side is going to be all open. And you just cut out all of the folds that are on your plastic sheeting. That you can throw away. Now that's the only thing that I use my guillotine cutter for. Okay, now what I do is take my ruler and then I take my tablecloth. Then what I do is I lay my tablecloth out and I want my finished fringe to be 12 inches. You're gonna need to double that because you're gonna loop these onto your fencing to create the 12-inch length. So whatever you create, if you want 10-inch long fringe, then you need 20 inches. Now I want about 12 inches, like 12 to 15. So essentially what I do is I just measure out the double. So I need about 25 inches. So I just cut at the 25, just like that. Then what I do is I just take my end, lay it over the top, and I cut about the 25-inch mark. This is not an exact thing. I like the fact that not everything is perfect. So if some are shorter and some are longer, I'm okay with that. Now what you want to do is taking your long pieces. You're just going to take a little stack. I kind of do it in half. And we're going to fold this over, fold it again, and fold it again. So you should be left with something that looks like this. Now what I'm going to do is on the short side, your fold where you have folded, you want to just cut like 1.5 2-inch strips. Now before you keep cutting, you want to verify that these are in fact still the long pieces. So when you have that, then all you want to do is just keep cutting your 1.5 to 2 inch pieces. This is not an exact science. I don't really, obviously I'm not using my ruler for this. I'm just eyeballing it, making sure it looks nice and good. And then I'm going to do the same thing. We're going to roll this on my fold side. I'm going to cut. Now, what I would suggest is that when you do this, that you cut all your tablecloths all at once. It's definitely boring because you don't get to like start making your backdrop, but it does help being more efficient with making your backdrop. So you want all your greens to be cut and then set aside. Then what you want to do is start working on your other colors. Now what you should have is all your tablecloths cut out. The very first thing you want to do is you're just going to pick a color. It doesn't matter what color it is that you want to start with. You're just going to pick a color. And what I like to do is take a handful of them, put them in half just like this, because it's going to be easier to separate them and hang at the same time. Okay, what we want to do is start at the bottom corner. Doesn't matter which corner you start off with, but what you want to do is take one plastic sheeting and you want to have it, you know, folded in half about. And I am going to go to about here with my sheeting because I want it to touch the ground and not show the fencing. So I'm going to put my piece of sheeting inside, loop it through that piece of fence, and then I'm going to open up my hole and I'm going to pull through my 2 legs and then just pull tight. Now that I have that, what I'm going to do, because this is my starting point, this is where I want all of my fringe to start off with, I'm going to go over here to the edge and I'm going to loop it through. And these ones I am going to tie onto the pole and I'm going to double knot them just so they don't come loose. And we're just going to move this to where they kind of will cover. By the time you're done with this, all of this will be covered. You can see that it's nice and covered now. So when you go to the very edge, you always want to tie. Now all you want to do is taking another one and you kind of want to go for the very first row. What I like to do is go all the way to the very other edge in a straight line. Okay, I'm going to do 6 across with the blue. Then what I'm going to do is, now that I have my one good line, is I'm going to go up just a little bit, not on this same row. So this very last one, you can see that we have a row right here. I'm going to go into a different row. And what you're doing is you're building those layers, the stacking layers of the fringe. So kind of doing the same thing, but this time I'm not going to really focus on my straight line. I'm just going to fill in the gaps a little bit. And we're going to stagger these to where they look nice and filled. The great thing about this is you can, you know, kind of fill it in the way that you want right now. Once you're finished with the fringe backdrop, you can take a step back. And if you don't like the look because you think it's not as full, you can always add more fringe later. And I'm going to put this right here, looping it through. And we're going to double knot this. And we're going to let that fall. Now it's going to look really bare and naked, but once we start adding more to it, it's not going to look as naked when you keep putting more stuff to it. So I'm just going to do a few rows of this. All right, I like that. Looks good. Okay, I'm going to switch colors now. So we're just going to take this and doing the same thing we did before. We're going to loop a few of these around our hand. Okay, I just have a stack of them. And the same thing with the bottom row, the very bottom. This is the only time I'm pretty accurate when it comes to this, is because I want to make sure that you can't see the netting from the very bottom. And there's truly nothing that we can do about that outside of covering that up with the fringe. Okay, then you will note that like my blue is going to be smaller than my yellow. I do that intentionally because I want it to be different. I don't want it, you don't want things to all be the same number, because if you end up messing up at some point in time, you're going to be able to see that and it'll drive you bonkers, or at least for me. So I am just intentionally making sure that I am not using the same amount for every color. So like my purple is going to be pretty small. That's okay. I'm okay with that. My purple is probably going to be thinner. It may be taller than all the rest of them. And it all kind of makes sense in the end, which right now it probably makes 0 sense. It probably doesn't look like a whole lot. I said the same thing to myself when I was making the first one. I was like, this looks like garbage, but the end results ended up looking fabulous. Okay, so I'm done with the yellow. This is how much I want to do for the yellow. Not a whole lot. And I can see that there's like some gaps, but I think that it'll fill in fine when we're done. Okay, coming over here to the left, same deal. A lot of this is repetitive. Once you've cut in all your sheeting, you're essentially going to be doing the same thing over and over and over again. We're just going to be looping and grabbing new colors. And for the bottom row, just like what we did for all the rest of them, I'm intentionally doing it all the same length because I want it to cover this green fencing. However, once it comes to everything else, I don't care where it goes, how it goes. I just want to make sure and cover this green fencing because that would, take away from the backdrop. And then when you get to the very end, remember, you just want to take one end and we're going to tie a double knot. And then you can just keep on keeping on. Okay, so now that I have my third color done, all you want to keep doing is keep going to the very top. Now, I will be back at the very top to show you how I finish this off to make it to where it looks absolutely professionally done versus a DIY project. Okay, so I'm at the very top with my orange, and this is where you're going to have to be real intentional about where you're putting your plastic sheeting, because for me, I do not want to see any of this right here. So before, what I was doing is I was taking my loop and pushing it through the hole. Now what I'm going to do is taking the loop, I'm going to put it behind, putting it through a hole and then looping it. The knot ends up becoming in the front, and I'm just going to nicely pull this. I don't want it to be extremely tight because I'm going to try and maneuver this plastic to where it covers that green sheeting, and then you won't be able to see it. So one more time, I'm just going to push my loop through the hole, and then I'm going to pull my ends through the loop. And instead of pulling tight, I'm just going to try and move this around to where the knot kind of stays at the very top, but it's not very tight, because if you pull really tight, what happens is you're going to have small little knots. So it's not going to cover much. And so you are probably going to use a lot more plastic sheeting at the very top, just because we are covering up the ugly green part, but you just want to make sure and cover those up, because I really feel like it really does finish off and tie off the piece. Now, if you're going to be doing a balloon arch over the top of this and you're not going to see it anyways, then, don't go the extra mile to do all this. But for me, I although I have balloons, I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to use them. Now that I have it covered, you can see that this right here is covered and you can't see the green. And then right here is still very much visible. So you just want to keep putting your plastic sheeting over. But I do think that this looks a lot cleaner and nicer and more professionally done than just leaving it bare and open. For me, that matters. And so what I like to do is, instead of working my way up, what I'm going to do is make my loops at the very top. If there are areas that are barren, because I'm doing heavy at the very top, right? If there's areas that are barren in between, then I am just going to add more sheeting in place. But because I'm going through every single loop and hiding that sheeting, you shouldn't need to put anything extra in between. But just in case, you can always go back in and fill it in with inside those inside the fencing. But right now, it doesn't look like I'm going to, and it definitely is making a more finished professional look. See, doesn't this look so good? Looks real professional, real professional. Okay, now I'm definitely almost finished. This thing right here is all filled in and looks fabulous. However, there is one big difference between this one and this one. You're gonna see that I have some really short strings up top, and I don't have any short ones here right now. Plus, this right here looks very open. So what I'm doing is I'm going to take my pieces that I've already cut and I'm gonna make them shorter. So taking my scissors, I'm gonna just cut the ends off, making them shorter. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to fill in the gaps a little bit, but I'm going to only do an end to an end, and then I'm going to loop and tie. But this I'm just gonna do like a single tie. So it's kind of the same concept as the sides where we just did a strand through a loop, and now I'm going to tie. Now when I tie them, I'm not going to make them even. I'm going to have one longer end and one shorter end. The reason for that is we're going to get these smaller little pieces, but then we're also filling in these little gaps right here. I just think that the gaps make it look super ugly and empty. But if we start filling them in with like these shorter pieces, the shorter pieces come out, and then it really does look like it's stacking. So adding in these shorter pieces right here, it's giving it more fullness, but it's also giving it more of a staggered look. Didn't these backdrops just turn out absolutely amazing? And the fact that both of these cost me less than $100 is fabulous. With 2 days worth of working time, it's okay because the amount of money I saved, I'm in love with these. Now with this one right here, I do notice that there is like a couple bare areas. So I'm just gonna go back in and I'm gonna fill up the bare areas with the leftover tablecloth, cut up tablecloths that I have. I used about a half a sheet of each tablecloth for the smaller one, and then 1.5 sheets for this one right here. So I definitely have a lot of tablecloth left, so I can just go back in and start filling them up. Now I need to know, are you a DIY or buy? Do you want to DIY this for less than $100, or are you just gonna save the amount of time that it took, and are you going to buy it? Let me know in the comments of this video. I sure hope that I inspired you to create and just try and DIY, because chances are, if you do try and DIY, you're gonna surprise yourself, because the end results of every single project that I ended up doing always just knock my socks off. I know you can have that same result as well. I will see you on the next one, friends.